Morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Conway's law, form following function and function following form, and how the structure of your organization or the structure of your team or the makeup of your team really can influence the way your organization, your team operates. And I'm turning on its head the sort of Bauhaus minimalist school form following function, right? That we want to design devices, we want to design furniture with the function in mind, right? And so we create the form that creates the function that we want to have, right? And I'm going to turn this on its head a little bit and look, because I think when we talk about complex systems, larger systems, organizations, we're really talking about function often following form. In other words, the way something is structured dictates the way that thing will operate. And so the simplest way this shows up, for those of you that are familiar with sort of the history of coding, there was a guy back in the 60s named Mel Conway who wrote a very influential paper, out of which came something called Conway's Law. And what he was doing was he was mapping this idea that an organization's structure will end up showing up in the code. And for him, it was like, in his paper, he talked about if you have, four teams working on I think it's a compiler. I'm sorry, I'm not a coder, so I'm going to, flub this up a little bit. But you'll get a 4-pass compiler. So 4 teams in the real world or in the physical world shows up as a 4-step process within the digital world. And so he summed it up saying this, that an organization that designs a system, defined broadly, will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. So in other words, the way people talk to each other within the organization ends up showing up in the code. This was expanded on by this guy, Nigel Bevan, in a way that I think is really useful, where he talks about organizations often will just produce a website with a content structure that mirrors the internal concerns of the organization rather than the needs and the users of the site. Right? So we organize our team in a certain way because it makes sense to us, it makes sense to our internal concerns for the organization. But then when we try to express that externally to our user, in other words, we want to give our user a certain experience of our site, a certain experience of our information ecosystem or whatever it is we're producing, that we end up mirroring our concerns rather than putting ourselves in the customer's concerns, right? So this becomes a bit of a problem. And I see this happening in a variety of ways. These are very simple, I think very linear, very direct ways that this shows up. But when I've also worked with purpose or mission-driven organizations which are trying to make the world a better place, I find that they end up creating internal structures which are it's not just structures, but it's sort of habits of behavior and habits of leadership and habits of interpersonal interaction, which are actually rather toxic. And I find it very interesting that we think we're going to make the world a better place. We think we're going to create a successful and purpose-driven organization when internally we're not being kind, we're not being decent, we're not being truthful often, we're being exploitive internally with each other. There was a rather ironic job posting I saw years ago, which was a nonprofit that was focused on human trafficking and slavery, modern day slavery, was looking for unpaid interns, right? And so, and it's, like you can see it making sense. Hey, we're working on this important problem. We want to bring people in who are inspired by our sense of purpose and therefore don't need a lot of money. But this can turn exploitive very quickly. And it also, like, who's going to accept that job posting? Who's going to work for that organization might just be people with the means to do that, which then locks out a whole lot of other people who might actually be better at the job or more appropriate to the work. So anyway, I think this shows up in a lot of different ways. I don't mean to digress. But what we're really talking about is we're really talking about thinking in systems, right? So we're looking at organizations as complex systems. And this comes from the wonderful book by Donella Meadows called Thinking in Systems, a primer, that a system is a set of things, people, cells, molecules, or whatever, that's interconnected in such a way that they produce their own pattern of behavior over time. As a matter of fact, let me just show you something real quick. When I speak to groups, I often show them this. I hope you can see it here. A slinky, right? So I could organize these molecules in a way that would have an entirely different set of behavior. If I melt it down and I put it into a block, and I were to do the same action with it, right? Hold the top, and drop my hand off the bottom. That block would it would just sit there, right? It wouldn't do anything. But when you organize the molecules in this particular way, and then I do this kind of action, then I get a certain set of behaviors, right? So we could say, what causes the behavior of the slinky? Is it me moving the way I move my hands, or is it the structure of the slinky? And I would say it's the structure of the slinky which is more important than the way than the way I move my hands, right? And this shows up in a lot of different ways, right? We might think that the market fluctuated because of some kind of political election, or because of some kind of specific event, right? But really, markets just fluctuate. Markets go up and down because of the way markets are structured. And so I think we can see this in many in our organizations, and the way we think about how we think about our organization. So I want to just turn your attention to beginning to think about your team, beginning to think about your organization as a system. And so the structure really matters. The way it gets set up really matters. So system structure determines system behavior. And this is as true of your team, of your organization, of our nation states, right, as it is of almost anything else, right? So think about structure, change the structure if you want to change the behavior. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a case here that we start at the top. One of the reasons we do what we do at the Alignment Company is because we work with leadership teams, because we believe that in hierarchical systems, the behavior of a leadership team really matters. As much as we want to democratize information flow, as much as we want to distribute decision-making across an organization, what we've found is that if we don't work with leadership teams themselves, if we only work on the organizational structure, because we're kind of hierarchically organized, both reflexively and very practically these days, without working with the leadership team, you end up leaving a lot of potential on the table, and you end up getting kind of stuck in certain ways. So I'm trying to brand this as Gower's Law. So far I haven't been successful. Maybe you can help. But this is an inversion of, or an adaptation of Conway's Law, is that leadership teams that have difficulty working together will produce organizations that are siloed and unable to coordinate effectively. And this means that in order to create innovative and collaborative organizations, we need to create aligned, trusting, and trustworthy leadership teams. We need to change the way our leadership teams interact and the way leadership gets expressed inside of our organization if we are going to change the function of the organization. So I very much believe that we need to start at the top. So if you're interested in talking to us about this, feel free to use the contact information below. I'll make it very easy for you to find me. I would love to kind of help you work through any team issues that you're having, especially at the leadership team level. So thanks very much for your time and attention. Have a wonderful weekend.